Welcome to the Social Engineer Podcast. This is the Human Element Series, episode 242. I'm Chris Hadnagy, CEO and founder of Social Engineer LLC, the Innocent Lives Foundation, and the Institute for Social Engineering. And I've been hosting this podcast since 2009. That makes me very old, by the way. As always, this episode is sponsored by our company, Social Engineer. If you are another organization out there looking for help with the threat of vishing, I'm sure you are, because everybody is right now, and you're wondering how to deal with it. I know a lot of companies are offering vishing services, but they're offering robo-dialers. So if you want real-world attacks that are human to human, you should give us a call. Go check out our website at social-engineer.com, see how we're doing it. Contact us. We'll be glad to meet with you and talk about our human-to-human vishing services and how we can help you stay resilient and strong against this new and upcoming attack. It's really growing. I think FCC said 550% last year. Of course, you can check out our training schedule for 2024 as we're hitting the end of the year now, or this episode is in January, so we're in 2024. So you can check out the whole training schedule there, and we look forward to seeing you at one of our classes. Okay, a couple quick housekeeping announcements. If you like the topic of social engineering, you should come on over to our Slack channel. There's over 1,500 people in there every day talking about all aspects of social engineering. And what I mean by that is the psychology, how to do it as a job. We even have a job board on there where about 10 people have found different employment, and companies have hooked up with people who want to get hired as social engineers. So you can jump in there. If you want family-friendly legal chat, then we're the place to go. If you're looking for something else, we're not the right place. Also, we want to invite everyone who's listening to check out the InnocentLivesFoundation.org. If you're not familiar with that organization, it's a nonprofit. It's been around about 6.5 years. And we geolocate people who traffic children and who create child abuse material. We work closely with law enforcement. We're not a vigilante group. So we're not out there like those guys who are filming people at McDonald's trying to embarrass them. We're actually doing real work with federal government agencies around the globe to locate people who are hurting children and make sure they get the justice that they deserve, being apprehended and stopping those crimes against kids. If you're a caregiver or a parent, you want information on this, you can check out InnocentLivesFoundation.org. Or if you want to help us out by joining or donating, you can also do that on the same website at InnocentLivesFoundation.org. And if you like the intro music and the outro music of the podcast, it's none other than the best rock and roll band on earth, Clutch. Neil Fallon, the lead singer of that band, helped me start the ILF. So of course we love them. Been a fan of them way before that though. So you could check them out on their website, especially go see them on tour. That's the best way to take their music in and give them some love for all the things that they do for us here. And last but not least, if you like what you hear on this podcast, give us a thumbs up and a like, and give us any comments. We love the comments. Actually, your suggestions for guests or your suggestions for new topics really do help us. So we look forward to hearing what you think about this episode, which brings me to our awesome guest for today. Let me give a little introduction to Tony UcedaVélez. Did I say it right? I think I got it right.
You got it. Chris.
Okay.
Nice
I was hopefully close. Thank you. So Tony UcedaVélez is the co-creator of the process for attack simulation and threat analysis, as well as the CEO of VerSprite. Tony has over 25 years in the InfoSec work across a vast range of industries, and is also the OWASP leader for Atlanta, Georgia. Tony, thanks for coming on the show today. Really appreciate it.
My pleasure, Chris. Great to be here. Big fan.
Thank you. So let's start off with a question I always ask people that come on this episode is, how did you get to where you are today? What was your career path to get to where you are as CEO of VerSprite?
So I was bored in corporate America. I was a senior director for Fortune 50, and I don't really thrive in places where I'm bored. So I'm a good worker when there's chaos. And so there's nothing more chaotic than starting your own company, especially during 2007, which was one of the recessionary times in the United States. So, but before that, after graduating from Cornell, I started in the .com era in IT. And I think that's really what, I was always, a tech nerd. Even as a little kid, I remember getting these magazines from this store in Atlanta called the Book Nook. And you get like magazines on the cheap, computer programming magazines, and you'd have these magazine challenges at the end, which, program these simple programs in BASIC, then later on in Pascal and stuff like that. But in the .com era of 1998, when I graduated, I dove into IT, and then, learned a lot about different silos of IT, which was great, for security, because you have to be able to understand function before you can apply dysfunction. So later on, as I transitioned to security, I worked for a managed service security provider out of Atlanta, Georgia, SecureWorks. And then I went to Symantec, and then I went to a couple different enterprises doing security. And then I basically was a senior director at a Fortune 50, and I was really bored and thinking that I could offer, some corporations a little bit better of what was out there. So I started VerSprite.
And what does VerSprite do? So tell us about that.
Sure. So VerSprite is a cybersecurity consulting firm. We have 5 different domains of expertise. One is on threat intel, another one is on offensive security, research, integrated risk management or GRC, and then DevSecOps, which is really in 2023 looking ahead, the heart of the company. It's really looking at how you can automate security, operationalize it, take information workflows, and truly create that kind of a domino effect where finally information can be operationalized or instrumented within security ecosystems. So we feel that there's a lot of challenges related to overconsumption of data, and there's ways to streamline that. So that's our current focus right now.
Excellent. So tell me a little bit about your focus now with the future, like what's going on. I know you wrote this process for attack simulation and threat analysis. So what are you seeing as maybe the things that we need to be aware of or look forward? I don't know if I'll work forward to. That sounds like something positive, but the things that we should be looking for in the future too, when it comes to attack simulation and threat analysis.
Yeah, it's interesting times in the sense that, automation, I think, puts a lot of, it makes a lot of product or service firms in cybersecurity to have to think right now on whether or not their business plan is going to continue in the same trajectory. From an industry perspective, there's going to be great advancements in automation for sure that are going to come from artificial intelligence, both with public and private LLMs. And there's definitely threat models related to information tainting that need to be factored in like yesterday, not tomorrow, but yesterday. And, I think that, another element that makes, the future of InfoSec or cybersecurity, whatever you want to call it today, interesting is the growth of growth challenges of geopolitical risk. So never had you have so much different, things going on in the world in terms of economics, in terms of, politics, social factions that are dividing, nations and cultures, not just within a country, but across the globe. So it's a really ripe environment for cybercrime. It's a right environment for recruiting and, establishing mules within different organizations or, flipping human assets inside of multinational companies. And these are a lot of things that I think a lot of companies just simply don't even have on their radar, to be honest. And because they're still looking at the practical, crackerjack type of approach to security, what's happening on the app stack and network and, some basics in social engineering, which you alluded to, which is largely, through scripted auto dialers and things like that. A lot of our techniques in information security, cybersecurity are really, they're mass market, but cyber criminals are really having more speared attacks and speared techniques that really defeat a lot of the things that we're doing. So it's going to be interesting times in the next couple of years. I think, there's a couple different challenges that companies have. We all have collectively. Lack of resources. I think there's a lot of poor content, a lot of poor education on cybersecurity. And that creates just a greater challenge for having the right team members to help protect and defend. But not the most positive summation there, but I think that you could probably concur with a lot of the things mentioned.
Yeah. It's, sometimes when we talk about this industry, of course, it'd be nice if we can be positive, but there's not a lot of it going on there when we talk about threat actors, right? So it's not like they're breaking into our accounts and depositing money. So, what do you think about the advancement of AI? So we're seeing AI kind of like what I'm noticing is just the growth of it in weeks. Like we don't talk about years anymore. We talk about, wow, what it was doing 2 weeks ago. It's now like 3 times more, 300% different, or I just see these massive leaps and bounds when it comes to the way AI is being used. And I'm noticing when we look at the news reports, more and more attacks against businesses as well as civilians using some of these LLMs or AI bots. What do you see as the future of that? What do you think we're going to need to do in order to start combating that?
Well, so many things to say there. I think, some of the original social engineering artists, I think, that are perfecting their craft with AI are definitely salespeople, right? If you think about, them being able to manipulate, human psyche, be able to establish rapport, talk about a value proposition, all of these things are, very useful in terms of techniques that a hacker would do in terms of social engineering. So what I see in terms of, AI and LLM adoption, I equate it to kind of like a flea market. And if anyone's ever been to a flea market, you mostly see a lot of trash, right? And you see a lot of things that you don't want in your house and things that are not valuable. But once in a blue moon on one of those like old blankets, you do see something that's like, wow, I got to have this. This is great. I can't believe I found this. There is a lot of poor uses of AI, in my opinion. There's a lot of people that are just trying to make a business model with some public LLMs and things like that. And that's fine. That's going to happen with anything that's kind of evolutionary. But it's interesting to see a lot of the functional use cases with AI right now in terms of business and sales and marketing. I think that there's a good orchestration of, visual, voice, and data to be able to create these fictitious personas that represent business entities. And that makes solicitations over different mediums, mostly over social media. And they're pretty effective for most people that don't have that clinical eye to be like, hey, you know what? This is actually not real. But, you can now align a profile. You could, basically have a cadence programmatically set for adding content dynamically for that fake persona or puppet account, whatever you want to call it. And then now align it with voice, a visual likeness, right? Of course, we've seen a lot of different deep fakes and fake illustrations that are not good quality, but I think that's just poor execution in terms of people that have tried to step into that arena. I am seeing a lot of obviously opportunity for a new wave of cybercrime to be a lot more tactical, I think, and I feel sorry for the aging population that will already have a difficult time to fall prey to those overseas solicitations with the proverbial bad English. Right. And they're clicking on something they shouldn't click. They're opening up documents they shouldn't open. But now they're basically having, their grandson, Johnny, being perpetrated in voice and likeness and everything. And it's so easy to harvest information on humans. We're probably not doing ourselves any favor by this podcast. But it's the stuff that I'm sure that you already know more than me on this, but it's something is worth reiterating time and time again.
It's one of those things. It's like we talk about this all the time. Like your OPSEC, and it's you have to decide at some point, right? Like you're putting anything out there about yourself. You're creating a potential vulnerability, but at what time do you say I need to educate or I need to be out there for business? Or people are like, well, you must be anti-social media. I'm not. I'm anti using social media to put your whole life on the internet. But if you don't advertise on social media today, you're not going to really have a business because there is no traditional marketing anymore, right? It's all social media.
Right.
I can't remember the last time I actually bought something from reading an ad in a magazine. It's all been from an ad on my phone. That's the way we do it. I don't know how many people I know that still have a cable connection. They're all using streaming services, right? So without commercials. So it's, I think we need to be aware of that. But I think what you said is really important, that the use for AI, and maybe not even just an attack, but just by salespeople or marketing people, is going to make it much more difficult for us to not be susceptible to some of these things. Because I was just watching a video on YouTube about people who are using Chat GPT to create marketing material, and it's amazingly effective at creating really good marketing messages for products and services. I was like, wow. I never thought of using that, but it's like really effective at doing these things.
Yeah. I mean, there are some bad examples of, AI usage, as you pointed out, I'm the co-author of this threat modeling methodology called PASTA, and, it's a risk-centric approach. And threat modeling, in the book that we wrote, took a page from ballistic threat modeling in the military, and where you really had inputs of threat intel sources. If you look at most threat models in cybersecurity, they're not leveraging threat intel sources. And so a lot of the LLMs that are being created by security professionals in order to create their own threat library are just simply, ushering in, these taxonomies of terms, which are good. I'm not criticizing any of these taxonomies. They're definitely needed and there's ways to use them, but, they're trying to leverage the attack framework. They're trying to leverage, CVEs and CWEs and correlate them, which is, definitely needed. But the missing anchor point is the threat. What is the threat? And in cybersecurity or InfoSec, there is this misalignment of what a threat is and what is an attack, right? So a threat is a possible menace and an attack is an actual means to realize a threat objective. And there's a huge disconnect there. There isn't that disconnect in the military. There isn't that disconnect in other very traditional forms of threat modeling. But, as an example of poor AI use, there's a lot of individuals that are just simply trying to get to A to Z very quickly, which is like, oh, look, Ma, I just built my threat library or my threat model. And all it's doing, the AI is just leveraging existing data sets that it has access to. And if the data sets are bad, it's going to make bad assertions and give you a bad model. So often what's scary to me, and this is just a micro example, is for decisions to be made on bad data, which goes back to the geopolitical aspect, right? There's going to be, that evil villain Bond type character that's like stroking that, some sort of like $10,000 cat and thinking about tainting information sources so that they can contaminate, financial markets, so they can contaminate social perception, whatever the case may be. So that's the concern that I have is we used to be in the age of information. Now we're in the age of misinformation. Mm. And there's a zillion ways to profit from misinformation.
So, this is the scary part, right? But now people always ask this question. So what do we do? How do we defend? I mean, if AI is this advanced and this dangerous and this scary, what can people do to start defending against this or understanding what the threat is?
Well, it's tough to be, overly optimistic, and, it might be the fact that I probably listened to too many hours of The Cure or Sisters of Mercy growing up as a child, but, or it could just be the reality of the fact that, there's, not enough systemic, tools and resources to know how to consume intelligently, LLM models. I think a lot of people are just simply trying to, leverage the cost savings, right? To your point on marketing, there's a lot of, corporations that I know that they have internal initiatives to say, how can we save a lot of money by leveraging public and private LLMs in order to catalyze these internal processes or replace others, right? That are a little bit outdated in legacy. So I think that with that rush, there is a tendency to be not very, to scrutinize what you're actually doing, and to scrutinize both the architecture, also the information model that's going in, a poor examination on simply, just the data sources. And a lot of people listening to this might be like, oh, Tony, you're such a Debbie Downer. And the reality is, we'll look at the software consumption model. We've had the same problem, right? In terms of like the supply chain of software, there is just a implicit trust associated with, certain types of open source software that get ushered into commercial products. They get integrated into our ecosystems and infrastructure. And then, it's an easy avenue for adversarial groups to be able to Trojan horse their way in. So and that's with, compiled software. If that's going to be the problem with that, and there's already a precedence with that, how much easier now with data sets, right? That are affecting financial decisions, that are affecting application loans, student loans, admissions in colleges, everything, politics, perception on candidates' stance, it just makes doxing, in terms of targeted attacks to persons of interest to be even, much more easier. And because you can collate a lot of different data sources from a lot of different places. So I think, the solution, because I want to provide a solution after all this suppressive information, is really to be able to have just a greater self-awareness and be able to bestow that level of self-awareness to your family, your friends, your business, colleagues, so that there is a contextual validation of things that need to be done, right? So out of band validation, like, Chris, you send me an email. Well, you might be a bad example because I'll naturally distrust you if you send me an email. But, if there's someone that sends, that's a compliment, by the way. If there's if there's someone that sends, an email and there's they're using the traditional emotional ploy to be able to get you to do something, right? Then, be able to validate, that sort of issue with the entity that is being, represented out of band to any type of number, URL, whatever, and be able to share that, information to people in your family, right? It's super important. And another idea is what I've started doing is, so I have, a number of kids, and I've started to teach them at a very early age to, ensure that they have, Puppet accounts, at age of 7, right? So you have certain accounts that you don't care, right? You're more like burner accounts. You're signing up to whatever, some loyalty awards app. You don't need to put in your real information there, right? Mm-hmm. All that stuff is just going to get mined either by corporations, maybe even by government. It's going to get brokered and sold and all that stuff. So there's a whole ecosystem of information. And so if you're having children right now, besides taking Xanax to be able to control your nerves and all that stuff, you need to be able to, responsibly make sure your Padawans in your, security guild, so to speak, are cognizant of the hostile, information world that they're in. So having, the right amount of account creation, account demographic information, and then also having safe words, right? In the event that something happens, like what is the safe word that no one else will know, but it's spoken over human vectors, not information vectors. Mm-hmm. At the end of the day, you just have to be creative, right? I think that, this is one thing about the human race is that, we have creativity that is always going to be not represented in a historical, data model. That's our advantage against, the uprising of the robots. But anyway, somewhere in there was an answer, Chris.
No, I used that same model with safe words with my grandma when she was around, as well as my kids, right? So we have safe words that we say are never spoken out loud unless there's an emergency. So if you put that in text or you say it over a phone call, I know that there's an emergency and that nothing will stop me from getting to you, right? Kind of thing. So those words are like, you don't joke, right. You don't mess around with them. That's not something you use just for fun, right? We have those kinds of things, like we set up physical second factor authentication to make sure that we can know right. If we're really talking to the right person. We do that after reading articles like about, these kidnapping scams now, where they're using these AI language models to simulate like a young girl's voice. And then they're calling mom from a spoofed cell phone. And they're saying, I have your daughter. And if you don't pay money right now, we're going to hurt her. And she's in the background yelling, "Mommy, help me." That sounds just like your kid. I mean, as a parent, I can't even imagine a scam like that. That would destroy me. So we set up these things to say, okay, if that ever happens, you're going to have to just remember one word. That's the word. You say it. I know now that that's the word. So now I know you're really in trouble, and then we'll do what we have to do. I think it's thinking about those kinds of things that we need to educate people on, because right now I don't know, unless you know of something. I haven't heard of anything that we can give to people or companies that can determine if something's a deep fake or determine if something's AI. Yeah, I don't think we have that advancement yet, do we?
I know, but there's definitely some cool projects from MIT where they're working with NSA to be able to discern, what is real, what is not. But, there's definitely a false positive rate with that. And, it's going to be a cat and mouse game for sure. But I think some of these, more human inspired methods are really important. And it kind of, as you were talking, it made me think about, going back to application threat models and this notion of implicit trust. In human contact, we oftentimes can make the mistake where we implicitly trust somebody because they were referred to us, or we're connected with them, or they know our neighbor. And so nowadays that's a recipe for possible, harm, and even more so in really application security. So one of the best things that is super simple to identify in doing application threat models, as an example, is to be able to say, where do you have implicit trust between your call flow, right? You might have a component in your application model that implicitly trusts another component just because it's internal. But how do you know that maybe that other component wasn't code off the shelf, right? That was, bought, procured, and then placed into your same VPC, right? And so I think it's good to see the whole zero trust, messaging come out. I think zero trust was actually inherently built into application threat modeling. But, I don't care if it's being hyper marketed and all that stuff into products. I think that, the idea of zero trust is that don't implicitly trust. But it goes back to what you just talked about, right? In the safe words that we talked about as humans, is to be able to have some level of validation that is secured and protected.
Yeah. So applying zero trust with humans, how would you suggest that? Because that's a hard one, isn't it?
Yeah. I mean, I saw this article with Elon Musk where he's like, he's offering people to implant something into your neural system. I don't know if you saw this. It's like a patch.
I haven't. No.
And so, the reason I bring that up is because, like, maybe, Grandma Shirley has always been great Grandma Shirley, but now she's not Grandma Shirley anymore, right? Because now she's tapped into this neural network where she's being fed, from a command and control system, and you were always trusting of her milk and cookies. And now, something's off. It's like maybe got too much ginger, there's a little bit too much nutmeg, and is she trying to kill you now? Hyperbolic example there, of course. Yeah. But, the answer, to the question is, I think when something is out of context, and we see this sometimes in our organizations where, you see actually playfully, we had this, I think it's pretty common in any organization where there are people trying to perpetrate executives, right? So we have this fun thing, where we talk about phony Tony, right? In the organization, and what are the mediums that we see phony Tony? And it's interesting to kind of see the solicitations, the attempts to try to perpetrate and things like that. And they can happen over any medium. It could happen over Slack. It could happen over Teams. It can happen over anything, LinkedIn and things like that. It's just going to get easier. So I think being able to contextually be aware of the relationships we have. It's ironic. We've advanced so much into this digital age, and we see, I think you and I, Chris, are about the same age, but we see a lot of our children, they get so almost intimidated by interpersonal, connection, but that's going to be the saving grace, right? It's because it's not going to fit a pattern. If you and I, spend, the next 5 years in the Maldives, I don't know, doing volunteering or something or whatever, running a hospitality business, we'll get to know each other on multiple fronts. And that sort of thing becomes subconscious. So when something is out of character, out of context, we'll throw up some flags. And I think that's important for those that are heavy technology focused to be able to not discredit some of the human innate capabilities we have in our subconsciousness.
Yeah, that's interesting. Yeah. Well, I think it's going to be interesting to see as we move forward on this, huh? I mean, I don't know what's going to happen. I don't have a crystal ball, but it seems like this AI thing is going to be taking us for a pretty big ride.
Well, I'm sure it's going to be okay.
Yeah. I'm pretty sure it's going to be okay, right? I'm not really sure, but oh man. So,
I had to say it,
yeah. It's a little, I want to believe that too, because I want to believe we're always going to, come out with a defense that's going to help. I don't know what's going to happen before that occurs, but I've been saying for a while that right now I feel like we're bringing a knife to a gunfight. So we got to start using AI in defending against AI, because we're not really doing a great job at that. But hopefully that will be we'll start seeing that this year, some advancements in those things. I always have a couple questions I ask for, ask guests that come on this episode. So first and foremost, everyone that is anywhere, with their careers, usually had some people that helped them along the way, have a mentor or two. Who would you say is your greatest mentor or mentors that helped you get to where you are today?
Wow. Well, in terms of human mentors, I would definitely say it's my parents. It sounds cheesy, but I'm first generation American. Classic immigrant story. And the hustle. That summarizes a lot of the immigrant story right there. It's the hustle, that work ethic. Translates to running a business, making sure that you run it responsibly, making sure that the successes you have are, passed to others, establishing meritocracy in your dealings with employees. But along the way, definitely there's been, managers. I've had teachers along the way, that have been, they can say just one thing. I remember, one of my first managers that, I was driving to Macon, Georgia from Atlanta, Georgia to a cell phone tower. There was a problem. And, he taught me about, empathy and, execution and, being able to, oftentimes we try to do problem resolution and we triage. We might not even know what the answer might be, but he did say that, putting in the motor skills of trying to do the scientific method, and that shows, internal, people that we care and that we're on it. Right. Small things like that, right? I don't think there's really any one person that is like the one that envelopes the mentorship prize, but definitely it begins with my folks, very hard workers, to this day. And
where'd you guys immigrate from?
It's complete. So they immigrated from Peru. Yeah. Mm-hmm. So it was typical story, poor economic times, came over here with absolutely nothing. And you learn along the little way, this is in the 70s and, the 70s, 80s, great time in American history, in my opinion, because, I think the heart of American, empathy, charity, giving was there. I mean, my parents, really benefited from a lot of the helpful hands along the way, and you never forget that, right? And then you return the favor, and that's just how society works to reciprocate. So, it's definitely, that's the top, mentors I have, in terms of getting started with my career and stuff like that.
That's cool. Okay. It doesn't have to be about the topic that we talked about today, but do you have any favorite books? Our listeners love to read, and we add our guests' favorite books into our book list. So what books have you read recently, or just your favorite of all time?
Well, actually, there's a book. There's a couple of them. There's this one book called The Alchemist from Paulo Coelho. He's a Brazilian writer. But the one that really stands out is a Mexican writer from. It's called The Greatest Salesman in the World, and I read it as a kid. I think it was probably like 15, 16 when I read it. Actually, my mom gave it to me, and she. We went to the library, and I think we photocopied, basically the book. And then I just read it. And, but it basically taught you how to align your overall nature of growing a business to a deeper calling. Much like you have, I think, you found your deeper calling with some of the efforts that you guys have with, trying to uncover, some of the digital traps that are out there for children. This is about, being able to do the right thing in terms of, business dealings. It's called The Greatest Salesman in the World. And it's faith-based, but even if you're agnostic or atheist and things like that, I think it's just a lot of great takeaways, in terms of being able to, look more deeply in terms of what is the purpose of what you're doing and how does this really translate to an improvement in societal terms and things like that. So those are, definitely, two that stand out.
Excellent. Thank you for that. And if people want to follow you or get in contact with you, what's the best way for them to do that?
Yeah, on X, I go by Tony UV, so T0NYUV, or LinkedIn. I think privacy settings might make it a little bit difficult, but if you just keyword search my very long last name or Tony and then VerSprite, then happy to connect and happy to network. I know that there's a lot of maybe students or recent graduates that are looking to get into the different industries and things like that. And always happy to help, and always happy to talk about threat modeling. So, but X and LinkedIn are great spots to find me on.
We'll put both of those links in the show notes for anyone who's interested in connecting with Tony. And of course, we'll add the books to the book list, so you'll have them there too. And Tony, I just want to thank you so much for coming on the show today. Really appreciate it.
A pleasure. Great to have a chance to be on the show. Big respect to you, Chris, and all that you've done in the industry and the contributions. So much appreciated. Thank
you very much. And thank you all for joining us this month on the Human Element series of the Social Engineer podcast. Next month, we will have Lane Netting on, and we'll be talking about adventure coaching. That will be an interesting discussion. So until then, stay safe, and we'll talk to you then. See you.